Welcome everyone to chesslecture.com. This is International Master William Paschall, and I'm bringing you part 2 of my new series called Spastacular Attacking Miniatures, a collection of miniature games featuring attacking play by the former world champion Boris Spasky. So here in Game 2 we're going to take a look at a game from the USSR Championship in 1958. This is a game where Spassky played against a very well-known Russian master named Alexander Tolush. Tolush was a kind of legendary strong player in that period in the 40s and 50s and even the early 60s. This is quite a classic Spassky style attacking game, different from the first game we looked at. The first game we looked at, he actually kind of, played a closed position. Here we see it more wide open. So Spassky plays e4 and Tolush goes with c5. Now later in his career, Spassky would have great clashes, in the Najdorf with many famous players. But here he gets pretty early in his career, gets a game with this older master Tolush. So I'm not sure if Tolush got the GM title or not in that time, but that's something that maybe our viewers can look up and check on, because I'm not 100% sure. He was certainly GM strength. So knight f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, and this was a hot time for the Sicilian Najdorf, 1958. I think people really started to get into this, and the Russians, or the Soviet players, did most of the theoretical work. Fischer kind of came on the scene and sort of looked at all their ideas in Russian chess magazines and stuff like that, and came up with his own analysis. But it was already being heavily discussed by these guys before Fischer came on the scene. So bishop g5. This is Spasky's kind of trademark. I mean, and not just Spassky. I mean, everybody. This was the fashionable way to play against the Najdorf. Long before Fischer came up with the Sozin variation and other things like the modern English attack. So now e6, classical move, f4, and and then we'd later see Spassky have to face the poison pawn or whatever. But Tolush plays the safer variation here, bishop e7, queen f3, and then queen c7. This is a pretty solid setup for black, but not the most dynamic, of course. Castle's queenside, very aggressive. Tal also played these kind of systems. So knight c6, and now here you expect some really aggressive move from white. I don't know what it would be exactly, but g4, you have to be careful with g4 in these kind of positions. But I suppose that it might be a move in this position. I'm not really sure. You have to watch out for things like knight takes d4, rook takes d4, and e5 type of tricks. But usually that can oftentimes sort of backfire on black. I mean, basically black has a kind of Scheveningen setup here, where white has got this really aggressive castling queenside and queen f3 in. I used to play the Scheveningen, classical Scheveningen for black, and honestly, these variations are tough even when white doesn't have this really aggressive queenside castling plan. But here I would imagine it's like Sozin's, where this g4 may be too early, or it might also be dangerous for black. But instead, Spassky plays very solidly with bishop e2. And Tolush plays bishop d7. And this is another move that it looks to me like black needs to find a more dynamic plan. Because bishop d7, it's usually a little bit passive, so easier said than done, though. Easier said than done. Bishop d7 looks kind of routine. And then f5. And this is a really aggressive move. Again, Spassky could try something like g4. But that's also somewhat committal when you play g4. So you might run into things like h6 and g5 against g4. So f5, and white plays kind of in the spirit of the Sozin. Queen on f3, putting pressure on the e6 pawn with the f5. And, you've got to get a break in somehow. He's willing to concede the e5 square. And we have the famous Fisher quote that said you have to give squares to get squares, so I think that kind of comes into play here. But the queen slides over to h3 in variations like this, and there would be a lot of pressure, very, very unpleasant pressure. You know, if you play knight e5, queen h3, how does black defend the weak point on e6? He'd have to play some really ugly move like queen c8, and that doesn't look like a good thing. So he just ignores it in castles, which is reasonable enough. At the moment, the bishop on g5, you know, getting in the way of the white pawn storm. So that will cost white a tempo at some point. But this game impressed me as kind of classical Spassky, and what we see is Spassky not just, you know, attacking like a maniac. We see Spassky mixing strategy and tactics into kind of one big plan and working it together. You know, and this is what's really beautiful about his game, is his ability, you know, to be balanced and to play really great attacking games that combine positional play and tactics as well. So castles, and now g4, strengthening the control of f5, but I think also planning on a later g5 at some point and gaining space in general. And then b5, and finally Tolush gets some counterplay. Now this has been a long time coming, but it's due to happen, and hopefully we get a little bit of counterplay on the queen side. It's a little slow, but we could connect our rooks. Maybe we can get rooks to the b and c files, play something like b4. Still, it's not that easy. He can break through perhaps at c2, try to break through at c2. a3, and this move, you know, is a very scary-looking move for white, because it seems like you're going to weaken yourself. And I wonder if it's not possible for black to sacrifice a pawn here with b4. I was thinking about this. If it's not interesting, maybe b4, knight takes c6, takes on c6. I'm not sure with the queen or with the bishop. Maybe with the queen, for example. And then a takes b4, and it looks like maybe black in this kind of position has some counterplay against the b4 pawn. So I don't know what Spasky's intention was. The other possibility is to take on b4. And maybe this was Spasky's intention. Take on b4, let black take with a knight, and then you have some opportunity to do something. But to me it looked like b4 was at least an active plan, even if it, you know, was a temporary pawn sacrifice or whatever. Something active for black to do. Instead, Tolush played this, which is okay. This move's okay, and then king b1, and still, I guess, b4 should be considered. But instead, Tolush played this move. This move is where we start to get problems for black.